Hi everyone, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and I just dissolved a half teaspoon of Wilton's violet icing color in half a cup of water. This is my favorite concentration to start with for dyeing 100 grams of yarn. And that's exactly what we're gonna do today. We are gonna create my classic dip-dyed violet, broken violet colorway with a twist. This week is the Summer Miniskein mini-series. So I thought it would be fun to include Miniskeins in today's episode of Dyepot Weekly. So today we are going to dye a bunch of 10-gram Miniskeins and attempt to break violet across it so that way we can create sort of this cool fade broken violet set. At least that's the goal. Normally when I'm dip dyeing broken violet, I will start with a dye bath of 8 cups of water with 1 tablespoon of white vinegar. But today in my dye pot I have 16 cups of water and I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of white vinegar. Now ultimately this should not make a huge difference. The concentration of acid, the pH, should be exactly the same as what I normally like to use. The main difference is the volume of water, because I want the minis to have certain space to move around as we are adding more and more to the pot. I think sometimes there's a little bit of a misconception. People will say, oh, you want to use this much acid per this weight of yarn, but really it's the concentration of acid in your dye bath that's important. If that makes sense, because it's the pH of the whole solution that makes a difference, not how much acid total you put in the pot. I am pre-soaking 10-gram Miniskeins in just some plain tap water. These Miniskeins are 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon. They are the wool to dye for micro platinum sock skeins. Technically, I have not broken violet on this yarn base before, but I have used the same fiber type with Knit Pick Stroll fingering weight yarn many times. Our dye pot is just below a boil, and now we are going to add the dye and immediately start adding the Miniskeins. Instead of doing some kind of timed interval, I'm going to add them a little bit by feel. My hope is that we'll capture that blue at the end on at least 2 Miniskeins, but we will see how this goes. So I've got our dye, I'm gonna pour it into the pot, stir it up, and immediately add our first mini. And so I'm not planning to like dip dye each of them exactly, but I am doing it a tiny bit slowly so that way I can get a feel for the level of color that's in there. So you know, I can see that there's still a lot of pink in there as I put these in. And I'm going to wait a little bit. We do see some red sort of crashing out around the edges a little bit, but let's see. Yeah, there's definitely still reds in there. I think we've added 3 so far. 3 so far. Cool, trying to make sure that everybody can see. It's definitely, I'm still seeing some pinks, but it does feel, let's see, we're getting bluer, but there's definitely still a lot of pink in there. But it's definitely getting bluer, but when I lift it up you can see that pink on the yarn. Yeah, we are definitely getting bluer though. But there is definitely still some pinks in there. So normally, like, I'll wait as I'm dip dyeing this until the very end. Like when I start to see the blue, then I like hurry and rush everything. So this is getting, there's still a little bit of pink. So you see There's still a little bit of pink on there, but we are definitely getting more and more blue. And how many minis do I have left? 3. So this is actually not so bad. This one, again, I'm still seeing a tiny bit of pink. But see, in that center area, there's definitely, we're getting close to my favorite blues. We're getting real close. Yeah, this one, I'm not sure if there's a lot of pink there, but I'm definitely seeing a lot more blue there. And in a very brief little bit, I am going to add this very last one, sort of leave it here, sort of in the center area. So hopefully we can keep that one being rather blue versus getting some more reds. Hopefully I did this slow enough. But even with this little tableau, you can see we've got some more pink, some more purples, and then that blue. Again, the water volume is bigger than I usually use, but oh, I am seeing some pink on that one. So maybe I didn't quite hit as bright of a finish as I wanted, but now I am going to, I guess, cover this up and let it go for about 10 minutes, and we'll come back. It has been almost 10 minutes and all of that color has basically absorbed. I feel like overall we're not really seeing fuchsia to bright blue. We're getting more of purple to sort of a deep blue. I think that more of the blue was absorbing a bit faster, and for the first time I'm thinking that the water volume may have actually made a difference, because having a bigger volume of water could have slowed down, would have slowed down the absorption of some of those reds, and so yeah, maybe having less volume allows all those reds to soak up faster. And so when the reds are more concentrated on one end, you get more of the fuchsia and then blue on the other side. There's no question that we broke it and that it's beautiful. But I'm gonna go ahead at this point and add 1, 2, 3, 4 tablespoons of white vinegar, so that way we can soak up the rest of the color. I normally would have just added another 1 or 2, but since we had 16 cups of water, again, I want the concentration, I want the pH to be that much lower, and so we will come back. But yeah, very pretty, just not as neon as we sometimes get. And like with the spoon, I mean, it looks like it's basically clear, but you can see that we've got some dilute blue over there. So I'm going to turn off the heat and just leave this to cool off in the pot for a little while, and then we'll come back and remove the yarn. Most of the color has absorbed. There is just a hint of blue in there. However, I am going to go ahead and just add a little bit more vinegar. There we go, and I am going to turn off the heat, let this cool a bit in the pot, let those blues absorb, and then we'll remove this yarn. Since I am now curious, here I have 16 cups of water. I'm adding 2 tablespoons of white vinegar, and we are going to dip dye a skein of Stroll fingering weight yarn to see what we can see. I have pre-soaked the Stroll. We are just below a boil in here, and I am going to add our ½ teaspoon of Wilton's violet food coloring that has been dissolved in ½ cup of water, and we are going to start dip dyeing. Now, I have a hypothesis. My hypothesis is that maybe the amount of water is making a tiny bit more of a difference than I thought with this kind of technique. When you increase a volume of water, you slow down the absorption of color just by diffusion. It takes longer for, say, those pinks to all bind. So therefore, in that time you might start getting more and more of the blues binding, because you see, like, it's looking fairly blue, but there's definitely still a lot of reds in there. So I have a feeling like it's looking really blue, but to I still think that there are some reds in there. And so I think if, and this is when I'd go ahead, I'd pop that end in. Well, that is looking pretty bright. Oh, maybe you can't see completely. This is looking pretty bright to me in terms of the blue. But there might be some reds in there. We might see that it ends up feeling a little more purpley. I'm curious though how this will compare to the Miniskeins that we just did. So I'm gonna let this sit for 10 minutes and then we'll come back and add more vinegar as needed. Coming a bit more overhead so you can see. We got a great example of broken violet when we do have some nice bright blues in there. We got a great example here. So I'm gonna let this cool completely and then we're gonna go wash all of our yarn. I added a zip tie around the minis to help keep them somewhat ordered through the wash step. There is definitely some untangling that I'll need to do. So honestly, it could be worth adding some zip ties earlier in the process. I'm just going to add a little bit of clear disco, but I'm fairly confident that all of the dye is in our yarn. I'm not seeing any bleeding, so I'm going to go ahead and rinse out all of the soap, put the yarn through my new spin dryer, and then come back and wash the dip-dyed broken violet on the Stroll base. So for all of my concerns that the water volume slowed things up too much, it's definitely possible that things were a bit slower. And so maybe I just should have slowed down the addition of the Miniskeins. But I also think that maybe trying a smaller volume of water so that way the reds can strike that much faster might actually help us with, trying to break colors on them. But anyway. Yeah, I'm not seeing any bleeding. I'm going to rinse out the soap, and then this is going to join the others in the spin dryer. And I'll be back once everything is dry for some conclusions. Here is our broken violet gradient across the Miniskeins. There is no question that the colors broke. We have some blue at the palest end and fuchsia, sort of purple along the middle towards the other. We have a gradient of hues and of color intensities, which honestly took me a little bit by surprise. I was so, perplexed that I went and with the same conditions dip dyed some Stroll fingering weight yarn into the Wilton's violet to see, can I still break this? Can I still see it? And yes, I can still break it. And so here we've got more blue all over, which gives us a lot more pink at one end of the yarn. So then what's the difference here? And honestly, I don't know. I don't think it's a volume concentration issue because with the exact same conditions, I was able to break Wilton's violet on the full skein versus the minis. The twist in the different yarns between Wool to Dye For Platinum and Knit Pick Stroll could be different. And it would have been better if I had some skeins of Wool to Dye For Platinum on hand to try breaking. That would have been a better comparison. But as you're dip dyeing, I'm moving the yarn in the pot a lot more. And so I'm giving more yarn access to that dye. And so maybe if instead of adding them to the pot and letting them sit there, I were to dip dye each one more, sort of dip in and raise it out, and then start dipping two, dipping them in, raising them out, and increasing it that way, maybe we would see a little difference, because when I'm dip dyeing to break Wilton's Violet, you can see the red strike, and as I pull it up, the blues that you see sort of drain out of the yarn. So it's possible that by that gravity, it allows there to be more blue in the pot at the very end. And so maybe this is why I can see more breaking with dip dyeing than I do with some other techniques. This is all a lot of conjecture and hypothesis, and there are definitely many, many ways to play with this further in the future. This is a beautiful, beautiful gradient fade set, and there's some kettle dyed tonal broken nature in each of the skeins. And so I think this could be turned into something really, really awesome. I want to do one other quick comparison. If you look at this gradient we created by adding these mini skeins to our dye bath one at a time, and compare them with the broken violet minis that we created when we were doing the Math of Yarn Dyeing food coloring edition, there you can see a huge difference. When you mix Wilton Violet in different concentrations, you get different levels of saturation, all of a purple. And this purple might break, you might see more purple and pink patches on the yarn, but we don't see this sort of periwinkle or pastel blue. The darkest colors end up being a little similar, but you know, these three palest colors are very pink and very different from what we see here. So there's no question that we got a lot of breaking. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and I really hope that you enjoyed this episode of Dyepot Weekly / semi-bonus for the Summer Miniskein mini-series. I'm having so much fun playing with these Miniskeins, and so make sure you go check out the special, because every night this week there'll be a new video featuring Miniskeins, including one later tonight. So make sure you're subscribed to this YouTube channel, turn on notifications so you don't miss a new upload. We have so much fun here. If you enjoy my approach to yarn dyeing and the way to play with color and the way that I really want to look at Wilton's Violet in as many ways as I possibly can, go check out the ChemKnits Patreon. Patreon is a platform that connects viewers with content creators, and as one of the perks, you get early access to new videos and behind the scenes sneak peeks. Thank you so much for watching.